Have you ever watched someone else get a standing ovation for the blood you spilled in silence? I have. I sat in the middle of the room while they clapped for someone else, someone who never showed up at 2 a.m., never skipped a single holiday, never bled through 14-hour days to keep that project alive. And right there, under the sound of their applause, it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This was a quiet execution. They applauded him like he'd built the project with his bare hands, standing in front of the entire company, 4 floors of developers, analysts, and team leads, packed shoulder to shoulder. Our CEO, Ben Caldwell, smiled wide, like he was proud of what we had accomplished. Except when it came time to give credit, he didn't say we. He said he. This kind of turnaround doesn't happen without leadership. Ben declared Michael took a sinking ship and turned it into a success story. Let's all take a moment to thank him. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just stared straight ahead, heart thudding behind a calm expression I'd perfected over the last 4 years. Michael. Seriously. Michael had been in Italy for half the quarter. He was CC'd on most of the chaos, but never stepped in. Never showed up for a single 2 a.m. emergency call. And yet, here he was, standing to a standing ovation. I stayed seated. I'm Amanda, project manager at Talvix Technologies, mid-size, but fast-growing, built on pressure and speed. For years, I'd been the quiet one who delivered the impossible without asking for much. I didn't play politics. I didn't brag, I just worked hard. Always 3 weeks ago, our largest client, Virexa Systems, was ready to walk. Their $8.3 million deal was on life support, and the team that was supposed to fix it, half were gone. The other half were in over their heads. So I stepped in. Not because I was asked, but because I couldn't watch it fall apart. I worked 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, slept on the office couch twice. I coded. I led, I put out fires. I sent updates at 3:47 in the morning. I saved that project. And now I was a ghost. The applause finally died down. People looked around, uncertain whether to sit or keep clapping. I remained still. On the inside, though, something cracked. I opened my laptop slowly and looked at the draft email I'd written 2 nights ago. Subject: request for salary adjustment. Still unsent. I'd wanted to wait. Be patient. Show respect. But in this moment, watching Michael beam like he'd earned any of it, I realized something I'd been too careful to admit. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. They didn't forget me. They chose to erase me. People think burnout happens all at once, like you wake up one day and suddenly can't function. But that's not how it happened to me. For me, it was gradual, quiet, like someone slowly turning down the volume of my life until the only thing left was work. When the Virexa project started to spiral, no one said a word. The deadline slipped, the system logs flagged, errors no one understood, and the inbox filled with passive-aggressive questions from their tech team. I waited for someone to take charge. No one did. So I stepped in. At first, it was just late nights, then weekends. Then I brought a sleeping bag to the office, just in case, and before I knew it, I had gone 3 weeks without seeing my apartment in daylight. I missed my little sister's wedding. Didn't even have time to text her back. My eyes burned constantly. My headaches turned to migraines, and I started drinking black coffee just to stay upright. I stopped counting. The hours after 80 in a week felt normal. My clothes got looser, my voice got quieter, and still I kept going. Not because I was chasing glory, not because I expected praise, but because someone had to. The back-end engineer started forwarding everything to me. You explain it better. The UI guy began asking if I could join client calls. You're the only one who doesn't make them panic. One junior developer confessed he only stuck around because I made the chaos feel less terrifying. So I did it all. Documentation, debugging strategy, client management, emergency patches. I was the last one out of the building and the first one back in. But I never complained because deep down, I believed something foolish. That if I showed up when no one else would, if I carried the weight that wasn't mine, if I saved the company from itself, they'd see me, they'd thank me, they'd protect me. That belief kept me moving long after my body begged me to stop. It made every ache worth it, every skipped meal, every silent night. I cried in the server room because the logs weren't clearing, and the CEO wouldn't answer his phone. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself it would pay off. But sitting in that conference room listening to the applause meant for someone else I felt it unravel, all the logic, all the faith, all the reasons I kept going. Gone! And in its place, a single thought whispered in the back of my mind. I thought saving them would save me. I was wrong. It took me 3 hours to write the email. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I kept rewriting it, softening the edges, trimming anything that might sound entitled. I read it out loud, I edited it again, I hesitated at salary adjustment, and almost changed it to review just to make it less confrontational. In the end, it was simple. Professional, unemotional subject request for salary adjustment. Hi, Ben. After leading the recovery of the Virexa project and supporting multiple critical deliverables across departments, I'd like to discuss aligning my compensation with my current responsibilities. I'm happy to schedule a time to talk this through. Best Amanda. I waited until 7:14 p.m. to hit send. No one would see it right away. I figured it would give them time to think. The reply came back at 9:03 p.m. Less than 2 hours later. No subject line, no greeting. Hi, Amanda. Appreciate the effort. However, given budget constraints and current company priorities, we are unable to accommodate your request at this time. Regards, Ben Caldwell. That was it. 12 words to summarize 3 weeks of 80-hour sprints. No mention of my leadership, no acknowledgement of my sacrifice, not even a placeholder meeting, just a flat rejection, cold, efficient corporate. I stared at the screen. It didn't hit all at once. Not like an explosion, more like a quiet implosion. A slow collapsing of something I didn't realize had been holding me together. I stood up from my desk and walked to the bathroom. Locked the stall door, sat down fully clothed, and pressed my forehead against the metal divider. And then I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just tears that refused to stop. I cried because I believed. Because I had convinced myself that showing up, over-delivering, staying quiet, being loyal meant something. Because part of me still thought if I do everything right, they'll do right by me. And now I knew they wouldn't. Not because they forgot, but because they never planned to remember me in the first place. It was in that stall between the cold tiles and the fluorescent lights that I felt the final crack, and no one heard it but me. No one checked in. No one noticed I'd left my desk. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Because at that moment, for the first time in my entire career, I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was starting to plan. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. I didn't go back to my desk after the bathroom. I went home. No goodbye. No excuse. I left my laptop in sleep mode and walked out with nothing but my keys. The next morning, I returned earlier than usual. The office was still dim, the air thick with recycled silence, and that faint citrus cleaner scent that always reminded me of early deadlines and late regrets. I needed to see something. Our team shared drive had a presentation folder. Q2, Recovery, Internal Recap. It had been added overnight. I clicked in slide after slide of metrics graphs, success points, screenshots of client feedback, even snapshots of Slack conversations. Michael's name was mentioned on 5 different slides. Mine didn't show up once I hit Ctrl+F. Typed Amanda 0 results. At first, I thought maybe it was a draft. Then I opened the official weekly status report, then the internal timeline document, then the client-facing log, same result. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. That was yesterday's wound. What I felt now was clarity, cold and useful. They weren't just ignoring me, they were erasing me. And that wasn't negligence. It was strategy. Around 9:12 a.m., I overheard it by accident. Two senior managers talking just outside the break room. Ben wants Michael to take over the PMO lead in Q4. Says it's time we had someone with client-facing confidence. Client-facing confidence. The same Michael who stuttered through every call and disappeared for 2 weeks during the Virexa sprint. I didn't move. I just stood there, holding my coffee eyes fixed on the water cooler, like I was deep in thought. When in truth, I was wide awake for the first time in weeks. By lunchtime, I had already started my own backup archive, not just emails and status reports. I pulled Slack logs, screenshots, time-stamped commit histories. Every note, outline, and correction I had contributed. Every late-night fix. Every direct message from the client thanking me. I tagged and dated each file, created a secure external drive. I didn't just want proof, I wanted a record. Not for revenge, not yet. This wasn't about retaliation. It was about protection, about truth. They could strip me from the decks. They could delete my name from the summary slides. But they couldn't delete the data I'd touched. They couldn't undo the impact I'd already imprinted into the foundation of that project. The irony was almost poetic. They had underestimated the one person who documented everything, so I let them keep going. Let them plan their promotion. Let them rewrite the narrative. Let them believe I was folding into silence, because I wasn't folding. I was watching. Preparing. And when the time came, when their version of the story crashed against the version I'd archived, I knew exactly how to expose it. No noise, no rage, just proof. Just silence sharpened into precision. If they wanted a silent war, I'd fight it by their rules. It started with a calendar invite. No subject line, just Virexa internal. Project debrief, roundtable. Amanda requested. Requested. I stared at the screen, rereading it 3 times. The invite wasn't from our team. It was sent directly by one of Virexa's directors. I clicked into the attendee list. Every senior name from their side was on it. Only 2 from ours. Ben Caldwell, and me. I accepted without hesitation. By Thursday morning, the meeting room was ready. Glass walls, high ceilings, awkward energy. Virexa's team filed in virtually clean suits and calm faces. Ben sat at the head of the table, composed, polished, always rehearsed. I took a seat quietly near the edge. The small talk died fast. The moment the formalities ended, it came. "Before we begin," said Elena Virelli, Virexa's senior strategy officer, looking directly into the camera, "I have a quick question." Ben leaned forward. "Of course! Why wasn't Amanda included in your original leadership summary?" The room went still. She didn't say it aggressively. It wasn't loud or accusatory. It was worse. It was calm. Curious, but deliberate. Ben blinked. We categorized contributions collectively. The leadership summary focused on executive oversight." "That's odd," Elena replied. "Amanda was our primary point of contact for 3 weeks. She made every executive call. She rebuilt your back end. She caught the compliance error we almost missed in Phase 2. Every sentence hit like a stone skipping across still water, gentle, precise, but impossible to ignore." Ben glanced at me for half a second. His lips moved slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Elena continued unfazed. "Frankly, we were surprised not to see her included, especially since your team kept crediting Michael's silence." I watched Ben grip the pen in front of him. His knuckles whitened. That was the first time I saw it. Not charm, not confidence, not the smug CEO composure he wore like armor. But something else, fear. He looked at me again, and this time his eyes didn't say, "Don't speak." They said, "Don't move." And that's when I realized he wasn't worried I'd embarrass him. He was terrified I wouldn't save him again. Virexa pivoted the conversation, but the damage had been done. The air had shifted. The applause he once owned now echoed with someone else's name. Mine! For the first time, someone said my name and meant it. And for the first time, I saw his eyes not as superior, but uncertain. Not as powerful, but exposed. By the next morning, the emails started trickling in. Not from Talvex, from Virexa. One from Elena, marked high priority. One from their compliance head. One from their lead engineer with a subject line that simply read, "We want Amanda." They didn't even try to be subtle. They wanted me on every call, every sprint review, every roadmap session moving forward. They even added me to the direct Slack channel between both companies without looping in Michael or Ben. And just like that, the story began to shift. Internally, it caused a ripple Talvex couldn't contain. Department heads started asking why the client was bypassing protocol. A few bold ones suggested I be reassigned to lead the next 2 phases. Ben, of course, resisted. He called an executive recalibration meeting. He used words like optics alignment and team equity. But whispers spread. People had questions. And when people ask questions about silence, silence becomes its own answer. By the end of the week, a new name appeared in the meeting notes. Not mine, Ben's. He was no longer just running the show, he was being watched. The board of directors had added him to their private calendar rotation. I knew that tone audit mode. I didn't say anything, but I knew Ben had finally started to sweat. It was Friday morning when I got the call. His name lit up on my phone. Ben Caldwell, mobile. For a brief moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I answered Amanda. He said his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Hope you're doing well." No greeting. No context. Just tone that overly warm, overly careful tone of someone who realized the fire alarm wasn't just a drill. "I wanted to personally invite you to a strategy session this afternoon. Just a quick roundtable realignment stuff. Would love your insights on Ben." I cut in calmly. "I won't be attending." There was a pause on the other end, long enough to hear the silence behind him. Maybe he was alone in his office. Maybe he thought flattery would still work. "Well, I think it's important we show a united front for Virexa. They're very vocal about their preference to work with you." "I know they are." Another pause. This time tighter. Tenser. "Look, Amanda, I know things have been tense. I just think this is a good moment to reset, to move forward." And there it was. The shift, the apology that wasn't quite an apology, the offer that wasn't quite sincere, but the desperation that was real. I took a breath, slow and steady. "It's too late, Ben Silence." Again. Only this time it wasn't mine. It was his. And it wasn't calm. It was stunned. I hung up gently, no goodbye, no emotion, just precision. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to yell. I just needed him to understand he no longer controlled the ending. And judging by the silence on the other end of the line, he did. The official termination notice came on a Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic. No phone call. No warning. Just a simple curt email sent to the executive team, CCing the board. Subject, project cancellation. Immediate. Due to ongoing concerns around personnel misalignment and loss of trust. Virexa is suspending all current and future collaboration with Talvex Technologies. Effective immediately. Elena Varelli, Senior Strategy Officer, 8 $3 million, gone in 2 sentences. No fanfare, just fact. By noon, the entire company felt it. Slack channels exploded with coded messages. Did you hear? Check your inbox, it's happening. Teams went eerily quiet. Department heads scrambled for explanations. One project manager said they had 5 open requisitions frozen within minutes. At 2:00 p.m., Ben called an emergency all hands. He looked pale, less like a CEO, more like a man trying to plug a leak in a dam with duct tape. Let me be clear. This is not the failure of any one person. It's a moment of organizational recalibration. Miscommunication happens. Expectations shift, but we will adapt. What followed was the most desperate performance I had ever seen. Ben didn't own the loss. He diffused it. He cited breakdowns in coordination. He mentioned overpromising by mid-level staff. He blamed disconnects in deliverable scope. And by the end of the meeting, 2 mid-tier managers were gone. Fired publicly abruptly, a human sacrifice to buy time, but no one looked convinced, especially not the board. They didn't speak, they just watched, their silence louder than any applause I'd ever heard. After the meeting, I returned to my desk like nothing had happened. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate, but I didn't need to. Because the halls spoke for me now. I passed by the finance director on the 2nd floor. Dana Reynolds, 20 years in the company, rarely said more than 5 words at once. She brushed by me in the hallway, leaned in just slightly and whispered, "You know you just ended his career, right?" I didn't respond, not with words. Just a nod, because I knew. This wasn't just a canceled contract. This wasn't just a client walking. This was collapse not from fire, not from scandal, but from truth. Truth that had waited patiently. Truth that didn't shout. Truth that simply stood in the room and let the silence do the rest. And as I walked past the boardroom one last time, saw Ben sitting alone with his hands folded and no one beside him, I knew what I had done. I had taken the last thing he had, not his job, his control. And I knew I had just snapped the last staff of power he had left. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. No dramatic speech. No cryptic Slack status. No farewell cupcakes in the break room. Just one email. Subject, resignation and supporting materials. Amanda Lee. It was short, gracious, precise. I thanked the company for the opportunity, I acknowledged the team's efforts, and I attached a zip drive with everything they never asked for, but always needed. Every decision log, every bug fix, every documented system patch, screenshots, timestamps, project audits. A digital breadcrumb trail that showed exactly who saved what and when. I sent it to 2 addresses. One to the board. One to Virexa. Then I closed my laptop and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs expand fully. The tension in my jaw released. The hum in my skull, the one that had been there since this entire ordeal began, finally quieted. Not because I won, but because I was done playing a game I never agreed to. I packed up slowly. Only what mattered. A notebook, a plant, a mug. Someone gave me during my 2nd year that said, "Fixer of all things." I tucked it into my bag and zipped it shut, like sealing a chapter. No one said anything as I walked out, but I felt them watching. Not with the pity people give someone who's lost, with something else. Recognition maybe, regret possibly, or fear. Because in the end, I didn't have to slam doors or raise my voice. My silence had spoken louder than any outburst ever could. That afternoon passed without noise. No reply from the board. Not even a bounce back, but 2 days later a memo leaked. Ben Caldwell was being placed on administrative reassignment pending review. That was their way of saying, "You've lost control." Sit down. I didn't celebrate. By then, I was already elsewhere, sitting at a window table in a quiet cafe downtown, sipping coffee that didn't taste like panic. I didn't check Slack. Didn't scan LinkedIn, didn't replay what-ifs. Because I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud, it burns fast, but freedom. Freedom is quiet, it lingers, it breathes. And that's what I had now. Not vengeance, not fame, just the knowledge that I stayed true to myself even when no one else did, that I left a record no one could delete, that I said nothing, and they heard me anyway. They once erased my name to make space for someone easier to praise. Now, they don't dare speak it, not because they've forgotten, but because they're afraid they were wrong. The offer letter came 3 days after I walked away. No recruiter, no formal process, no hoops, just a single direct email from Elena Varelli, subject, strategic partner, opportunity, Amanda Lee. The body was simple, no fluff, no HR filler, just clarity. We've reviewed your work, not just in deliverables, but in character. What you did under pressure speaks louder than any resume. We'd like to offer you a position as strategic project consultant with full autonomy on timelines and team composition. Compensation: double your previous salary. Terms flexible. Trust already earned. At the bottom, one line stood out. Here your name means something. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because something in me needed to absorb it slowly, like letting sunlight reach a room that had been closed off too long. No second guessing. No need to prove, just acknowledgement, just respect. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I smiled, small, steady, and for the first time in weeks, real. I closed my laptop and stood up, walking toward the window of my apartment. Outside the city moved on like it always had. Cars rushing people, weaving through sidewalks, unaware that somewhere in that current, a quiet victory had just unfolded. I made tea, not because I was tired, but because I could. There were no meetings to brace for, no emails laced with tension, no weight hanging over my chest like it had for months. I sat down near the window, laptop still closed, tea in hand. For once, I wasn't reaching for the keyboard to defend myself. I wasn't calculating my next move. I was just here, free. The next morning, I opened my laptop, not from dread, but from curiosity. A single message sat in my inbox from a former Talvex developer, someone I hadn't heard from in months. Just wanted to say, thank you. You gave us the courage to finally quit, too. I read it twice, then replied with 2 words. I see you. Because I did. I saw everyone who stayed silent like I had once, everyone who thought dignity came from endurance, everyone who didn't yet know that sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's claiming what's already yours. That afternoon, I signed the offer. Not because I needed the job, but because it honored the part of me that Talvex had tried to erase. Sometimes you don't have to stay to win, you just have to leave at the right time. Ben Caldwell was replaced quietly. No farewell speech. No LinkedIn announcement. Just a 1-line internal memo. Effective immediately. Ben Caldwell will no longer serve as CEO of Talvex Technologies. There was no ceremony, no thank you, just absence. A week later, Talvex rolled out new internal policy updates. All project contributions would now require detailed attribution. Every team member listed. Every hour logged with names. No more silent labor, no more invisible effort. The irony didn't escape me. I didn't post about it, didn't brag. I didn't even mention Talvex by name. But when I was invited to speak on a podcast called The Cost of Silence, I said yes. Just once, I didn't name names. I didn't shame. I just told the truth. I spoke about the danger of mistaking loyalty for weakness, about the power of documentation, about what it means to stay quiet for too long, and what happens when you finally stop. The episode aired on a Thursday. By Friday, my inbox was full. Some messages were from strangers who said my story gave them the courage to speak up. Others were from people still stuck inside rooms like the ones I'd walked out of. But one message stood out. It was from a new developer at Talvex. I found your log file. Thank you. It saved us. You saved us. I sat with that for a while because I hadn't meant to save anyone. I just refused to disappear. But maybe that was enough. Maybe showing up refusing to be erased quietly, leaving a record. Maybe that is the legacy. Not noise, not revenge. Just proof that you were here. And you mattered. If you're someone who's been cut out, written off, or quietly erased, don't be afraid. Let your silence echo so loudly. The entire system is forced to listen. You're lucky we still keep you around. That was the first sentence he ever said to me that morning. No hello. No thanks. Just that, I remember staring at the screen, pretending not to hear, but my hands clenched under the desk. I wasn't angry yet, just confused. After everything I'd done, how could I still be disposable? Let me rewind. My name is Rachel. For the past 4 years, I've been the woman behind the curtain. No spotlight, no stage, just the quiet grind, first one in, last one out. While others were still pouring their first coffee, I was already deep into reports, prepping decks, triple-checking client contracts. There was Delta Corp, our riskiest deal ever. I worked 17 nights straight, sometimes sleeping on the office couch just to close it. Then Aurora, the most indecisive board of directors I'd ever met. I spent 3 months massaging every clause in the agreement until they finally signed. And most recently, Orion Group, a massive 2-year contract that practically saved our fiscal year. I flew across states, canceled family holidays, even missed my mother's surgery consultation to finalize it. But I never complained. Not once I believed foolishly. Perhaps that hard work spoke for itself. So after landing those 3 back-to-back contracts, I thought this is it. This is the moment they see me. I polished my pitch, ran the numbers again, and scheduled a meeting with Grant, the newly hired director who barely knew my name. I had everything laid out: revenue, impact, growth metrics, client retention rates. It wasn't just about the raise. It was about finally being visible. That morning felt different. Not louder, not busier. Just still. I stood outside the glass door, folder in hand, watching my own reflection in the tint. My blazer sat perfectly on my shoulders, my hair tucked neatly behind my ears, but my fingers tightened slightly around the edges of the file, not from fear, from restraint. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even excited. I was focused. For once, I wasn't going in to fix someone else's mess, or sue the client, or pick up the pieces behind the scenes. I was walking in for me. 4 years of being the backbone without a name. Today I wanted to be seen. Not celebrated, just seen. So I took one breath, just one, and reached for the handle. The door clicked open. Grant didn't even glance up as I stepped in. He sat at the head of the glass table, legs crossed, scrolling something on his phone. I waited until he finally looked up briefly. No smile, no greeting. "Let's make it quick," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I swallowed and took my seat, sliding the folder toward him. "I'll be brief," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Over the past 12 months, I've overseen and closed 3 major contracts. Delta, Aurora, and Orion, collectively bringing in over $15 million in revenue. In each project, I led the team manage risk and secured long-term retention commitments. I'd like to formally request a salary review based on this performance." He stared at the folder like it was a napkin someone had left behind. Then he leaned back. "You know," he said slowly, "you really should be grateful you're still here." I blinked. "Excuse me," he smirked. "What you've done, sure, it's decent, but it's not like the rest of the team just sat around. Anyone here could have closed those deals. You just happened to be in the right place, right time." The air left the room. My palms were still on the table, but I couldn't feel them anymore. My breath caught somewhere in my throat. I opened my mouth to reply something calm, something logical, but nothing came out. He stood walking toward the window. "Look, Rachel," he added over his shoulder, I've only been here a few months, but trust me, ambition's good entitlement. Not so much. I nodded once out of habit, more than anything, and stood up. As I reached the door, I heard him murmuring almost as if to himself, "You people always want more." That was the moment. Not the numbers, not the folder, not even the insult, that sentence. You people. He didn't just dismiss my work, he dismissed me. I walked out of the room without looking back. My hands were still trembling, but my eyes dry. Focused. Something had shifted, not just inside me, but around me. They thought they were in control. They had no idea what was coming. The door closed behind me with a soft click. But the sting from that meeting rang louder than any slam could. I tried to walk back to my desk, with my head held high. But when you've just been made small, your body forgets how to take up space. As I passed the break room, I caught voices, Grant's voice low casual, his assistant's soft laugh. "She really walked in there like she was irreplaceable," he said. "Who does she think she is? Like this whole company would fall apart without her." He chuckled. His assistant did too. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. But something inside me dropped like glass off a ledge. It wasn't just what he said. It was how easily he said it. Like it was a joke, like I was the joke. When I reached my desk, I sat down like I'd done 1,000 times before. But this time I couldn't quite find myself in the chair. I opened my inbox out of habit, stared at the subject lines blurring across the screen. Deadlines, contracts, follow-ups, same as always. But nothing felt the same. Across the room, I spotted Darren. We used to share inside jokes and coffee runs. He helped me proofread my first pitch deck when I was new. Now he looked at me with a smirk. Not angry, just amused. Like he already knew the meeting hadn't gone well, like maybe he'd even heard about it before I walked in. He leaned over and whispered something to a nearby analyst. She giggled. Not loudly, just enough to be noticed. That was the worst part. Nothing was direct. No one came at me with sharpened words. They didn't have to. Their silence did the cutting. I'd spent years being the safety net, the go-to, the quiet storm that fixed everything without needing applause. Now I was alone in plain sight, invisible yet exposed. I looked down at my hands on the keyboard. Still steady, but they didn't feel like mine. In that moment, I realized something simple and sharp. If I stay silent, I'll disappear. They didn't need to fire me. They just needed to ignore me long enough that I'd start to question whether I belonged here at all. But I've rebuilt broken systems, salvaged dying contracts, and brought companies back from the brink. So if they wanted to act like I was nobody, maybe it was time I reminded the right people exactly who I was. I took the early train on Saturday. No laptop, no company phone. Just a small overnight bag and a guilt I'd been carrying for months. The last time I promised to visit my mother, I canceled the night before. The Orion contract was on the verge of collapse, and I told myself she'd understand. She always did. 3 flights canceled, 2 birthdays missed, 1 surgery consultation where she sat alone in a waiting room waiting for a daughter who didn't show up. She never brought it up. That's what made it worse. When I arrived, she was sitting on the porch wrapped in a pale blue blanket, tea in hand. She smiled as if nothing had changed, like I'd been there just last week. I wanted to say I was sorry, that I shouldn't have let work replace family, that no contract was worth this kind of distance. But the words stuck. So I sat beside her, said nothing, and just held her hand. Her skin felt colder than I remembered. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel busy. I felt empty, that night in the quiet of my old bedroom walls, still covered with posters from a life before email. I opened my laptop. I wasn't angry anymore. Just awake, I pulled up my contact list and started typing. The first email went to Delta. "Hi, Amanda. I wanted to thank you again for the trust you placed in me throughout our recent project. If there's ever anything you need, questions, clarity, or support, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to help. Warmly, Rachel. The second went to Aurora. The third to Orion. Same message, warm, professional, purposefully vague. I didn't mention the company, I didn't mention Grant, but they'd notice because people remember who shows up and who disappears. When I was done, I stared at the 3 open messages. My hand hovered over the trackpad for a moment, and then with a steady breath, I hit send, send, send. No fireworks. No immediate reply. Just a blinking cursor on a blank screen, but something had shifted. Not in them, in me. Monday morning came like any other. The lights in the office flickered on at 7:45. The coffee machine hissed like always, and the keyboards began their quiet tapping chorus. No one looked at me differently. No one said a word. It was like nothing had happened, and maybe on the surface nothing had, but inside me, everything had shifted. I walked in with steady steps, set my bag down like always, opened my laptop with the same practiced motion. But this time, I wasn't checking project updates or unread Slack messages. I was watching for the ripple. Because I'd cast a stone into still water, and stillness never lasts. By noon, my inbox was as silent as the floor around me. No replies, no calls, no whispers, just the hum of productivity and the low murmur of small talk. I kept my face neutral, my movement smooth. But something under my skin was buzzing. Not anxiety, not panic. Readiness, like a storm cloud that hadn't cracked yet but would. The hours dragged. I worked. I waited, still nothing. By the time I left the office that evening, the sky had turned a deep steel gray. I walked home instead of taking the train. Needed air, needed silence that wasn't forced. At home, I changed into an old sweatshirt and let myself move slowly for the first time in days. No meetings, no performance metrics, just me and quiet. I was rinsing a dish in the sink when the phone rang. The sound cut through the kitchen like a blade. Not a text, not a notification. A call. I dried my hands, checked the screen. Delta Corp. My pulse quickened, but I didn't let it show, even to myself. I answered, Rachel speaking. There was no small talk, no fluff, just a voice I knew well, Amanda Delta's executive liaison. Her tone was sharp. Unapologetic. Rachel, we've just been informed you're no longer overseeing our account. Is that accurate? I hesitated. Only a beat. That's correct. Internal shift, a pause. Then we don't want anyone else. You've handled every step with precision, and our board has confidence in you. Not your replacement. Silence. If you're not leading this project, we'll be forced to pause all further execution until the matter is resolved. It wasn't a threat. It was a decision. I thanked her for the call, hung up, and set the phone down on the counter. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer the kind that made me feel small. It was the kind right before the structure starts to crack. The next morning, something had shifted. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was there in the glances, the pacing, the low murmurs that slipped between cubicles like static. The air was no longer still. It was charged at 9:12 a.m. My inbox pinged Aurora Legal Team. Subject immediate personnel request. I opened it slowly, almost ceremoniously. Dear Rachel, following recent internal updates, we've been informed of a change in personnel overseeing our account. As per contract terms, any shift in key liaisons requires our written approval, which was not sought nor granted. We request that you remain in your current role for continuity and to prevent contractual breach. Kindly confirm by end of day. Respectfully, Aurora Board. Operations. I stared at the screen for a second. then smiled just slightly. At 11:03 a.m., the receptionist delivered a courier envelope to my desk. Heavy cream stock, sealed in gold foil, from Orion Group, hand-signed. We'd like to formally invite you to join our Asia-Pacific Executive Committee as Senior Operations Director. Compensation package and relocation options enclosed. No meetings. No interviews. They weren't asking for my resume. They were asking for me. Across the floor, I noticed heads turning. Conversations dropped when I walked past. Someone stood from their desk to peek into the hallway before quickly sitting back down. The shift wasn't just happening behind closed doors now. It was spreading. By 2 p.m., the energy in the office had frayed into open confusion. Grant scheduled a surprise check-in meeting. Urgent, all hands. I didn't attend. I wasn't required to. I wasn't part of his inner circle. But I could feel the pressure in his voice through the glass wall of the conference room. Sharper, clipped louder than usual. He was scrambling. Something was slipping from his grip, and he couldn't see where it was going. I sat at my desk, calm, unreadable, while the storm gathered just feet away. Then I did something quiet, deliberate. I printed all 3 correspondences. Aurora's demand, Delta's warning, and Orion's invitation. Heavy paper, bold headers, signatures in ink. I stacked them neatly, clipped them together, and slid them into a plain white envelope. No label, no flair, just quiet truth folded into silence. I tucked it into my bag, didn't say a word, but I knew this envelope didn't just carry paper. It carried weight. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, the sky a kind of calm blue that didn't match the tension sitting in my chest. I didn't rush. I didn't prepare a speech. I simply slipped the white envelope into my bag, zipped it closed, and walked through the glass doors of the office like it was any other day. But it wasn't. I passed coworkers who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The ones who'd laughed quietly last week now stared at their screens with unnatural focus. Darren avoided me entirely. Good at 10 a.m. sharp. I walked down the hallway toward Grant's office. His door was slightly ajar. I knocked once and stepped in. He looked up with that same familiar smirk, half smug, half dismissive, but it didn't last. I didn't sit. I didn't explain. I walked up to his desk, pulled the envelope from my bag, and placed it directly in front of him. His brow furrowed. What's this? I didn't answer. He opened it slowly, still trying to maintain some sense of control. The moment his eyes scanned the first page, Aurora's email, his jaw stiffened. By the second page, Delta's warning, his posture changed. Straighter, sharper. And when he reached the third, the formal invitation from Orion, with my name bold at the top, his entire face shifted, the smirk was gone, so was the confidence. He looked up, blinking, as if to reset his entire understanding of the room. Is this real? He asked. Voice suddenly smaller. I tilted my head slightly. Not smug, not cold, just done. It's all real. He stared at the papers like they were foreign, like they couldn't possibly belong to someone like me. This changes everything. He muttered almost to himself. Why didn't you bring this to me sooner? We could have. I held up a hand, calm and steady. I'm not here for a negotiation. He froze. I'm not angry, Grant, I said. I'm just not silent anymore. He didn't respond. Couldn't. Because there wasn't anything left to say. I turned without waiting for a reaction and walked out the same way I came in. Quiet, certain. No theatrics. But the silence I left behind. It wasn't the kind that faded. It was the kind that echoes. I didn't return to my desk after I left Grant's office. There was nothing there I needed anymore. Instead, I walked outside, let the cool air hit my face, and stood beneath the morning sun for a few quiet minutes, long enough to feel the weight start to lift. Back inside, I sipped coffee slowly in the break room, listening to the office hum with nervous energy. The rumors were already moving faster than any memo. People had seen the envelope, seen Grant's reaction, seen me walk out, calm, composed, untouched. He called me back an hour later. The tone in his voice wasn't commanding this time. It was careful. "Rachel, can we talk?" Privately. I walked in with my shoulders relaxed. No folder in hand. No notes. No need to prove anything. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. He stood instead, no longer behind the desk beside it, like he was trying to level the field now that the ground had shifted. I've reviewed everything he started. And I want to say, maybe I was too quick to judge your contributions. It's clear the clients trust you, that you've been an asset. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He continued, voice picking up pace like he was chasing control. Again, "I'm prepared to offer you a salary increase, double what you're currently making. And a new role, lead client strategy. You'll report directly to the executive team." He paused, waiting for the relief in my face. The gratitude, the yes. It didn't come. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I didn't see authority. I saw fear cloaked in a proposal. Panic polished as opportunity. "I'm sure that's a generous offer," I said softly. He nodded, relieved. "It is." I tilted my head, but I'm not interested. He blinked. "You're not, no. I used to think being recognized was the prize, that one day someone like you would finally see the work I put in, and I'd feel whole. But now I know freedom is the real reward, not being allowed to speak, but choosing when and how to be heard." His mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. "You can keep the title, the raise. The role." I said gently, "I've already accepted something better." I turned toward the door. "Rachel," he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "We can still." "You don't understand," I said, glancing over my shoulder. "I'm not here to be fixed. I'm finished," and then I walked out. No big scene, no applause, just the sound of heels on tile, steady and final. I didn't turn around, but I could feel it, the way he stood there, still, the weight of it all finally settling on his shoulders. He wasn't the center of the room anymore. I was. And I was already gone. It didn't take long. By Wednesday, Delta sent an official letter. All project activity was suspended until Rachel was reinstated or replaced by someone of equal experience and proven track record, which they made clear no one else at the firm currently held. On Thursday, Aurora froze their funding pipeline entirely. No meetings, no movement, and certainly no trust. Their legal team cited breach of partnership terms due to unapproved personnel changes. But the real blow came Friday morning. Orion, calm, polished, and surgical, delivered two communications. One, addressed to Grant's company, declared a full termination of their agreement, effective immediately. The second arrived in my inbox. "We are pleased to confirm your appointment as Senior Director of Operations, APAC Region. Welcome aboard, Rachel." No extra words. No theatrics. Just a sealed fate and a new beginning. Inside the office I'd left behind, chaos had begun to spread like cracks in old concrete. Slack channels were locked. Emergency meetings were called, and still nothing could stop the spiral, because this wasn't just a bad week. This was a reckoning. I didn't need to be there to witness it. The stories reached me anyway. Whispered messages, screenshots, forwarded emails. Like the one from the board, subject line in all caps. Urgent governance review. Immediate audit required. Grant was pulled from all strategic duties by end of day. Temporary reassignment, they said publicly. But inside everyone knew what it meant. And then someone leaked the email that cracked it all open. Internal short, brutal. Rachel's departure triggered everything. 5 words. That's all. The silence that used to erase me had become the sentence that defined the collapse, and I didn't have to lift a finger. No revenge, no sabotage, no shouting matches in boardrooms. Just clarity, timing, and the undeniable truth of value once dismissed. I sat at my new desk that afternoon, top floor corner window, a different city, a different rhythm, and stared out across the skyline. Somewhere Grant was likely staring at a screen, reading legal memos, trying to find someone else to blame. But there was no one left to throw under the bus, because the person he underestimated was the one holding the system together all along. The office was quiet, but not in the suffocating way I once knew. This quiet held space, breath-light. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden streaks across my desk. A fresh notepad. A sleek laptop. A nameplate that read Rachel Lynn, Senior Director. APAC Operations. I sat down without rushing. No tightness in my chest. No second-guessing. Just a steady sense of arrival. I opened my laptop. No alarms. No passive-aggressive emails. No meetings demanding. I prove why I belonged here. Just a clean screen. And then an email notification. Subject: Welcome to the executive team. I clicked it open. Rachel, we're thrilled to have you on board. Your leadership style, strategic insight, and resilience speak volumes. Let's build something meaningful together. Warmly, the Orion team. There were no exclamation points. No corporate fluff. Just clarity and respect. The kind of message that doesn't need to be loud to feel powerful. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunlight warm my face. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was behind or catching up or earning space in the room. I was simply here. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to a boardroom, not to a supervisor, not even to myself. The past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. A phone rang softly on my desk. Orion's Global HQ. I answered without hesitation. This is Rachel. The voice on the other end was warm. Collaborative, ready. We're prepping for the regional rollout. You good to lead the call? I smiled. Yes, I'm ready. Let's build it the right way. And with that, I stepped fully into the future. Not as a fixer, not as a background player, but as a leader who chose herself and built her own seat at the table. Sometimes the system isn't broken. It's built to keep you out, and sometimes you don't need to fight for a place inside it. You just need to walk away and build better. If Rachel's story resonated with you, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever had to walk away to finally be seen? Share your story. Send this to someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, so you never miss a story like this one. Your next chapter might start today. Let's write it right.